The slideshow had been running for about 20 minutes when they got to me. I heard the laughter before I even saw the photo. It was a picture from my college graduation, the one where my cap was crooked, my gown was 2 sizes too big, and I was squinting into the sun like I was trying to read a street sign from a moving vehicle. Underneath it, in bold white letters, someone had typed, "The Johnson family's most reliable punchline." The entire ballroom erupted. My aunt nearly choked on her champagne. My cousin Marcus was doubled over, pointing. My mother, my own mother, pressed her lips together in that way she does when she's trying not to laugh, but failing completely. And Nicole? Nicole was standing at the front of the room, clicker in hand, smiling like she'd just won something. She had. I picked up my clutch. I was done. I had taken exactly 4 steps toward the exit when the ballroom doors swung open and everything changed. Let me back up, just slightly, because you need to understand what kind of night this was before you can understand what happened next. The Johnson family reunion had been Nicole's idea. It always was. Every 2 years, without fail, Nicole orchestrated some version of a gathering that was less about family and more about optics. This year, she'd outdone herself. The Astoria Grand Hotel. A rented ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows. Catering that cost more than my first car. A custom slideshow with a DJ who knew how to time music drops for maximum emotional effect. Nicole had been planning this for 8 months. She'd told everyone. What she hadn't told anyone was what she'd planned to do to me inside that slideshow. I found out the same time everyone else did. The first 20 minutes were standard, baby photos, wedding throwbacks, embarrassing middle school yearbook pictures that everyone expected. My dad, Richard, looked relaxed for the first time in months, standing near the bar with his old college friends, laughing at photos of himself from 1989 with a mustache that had no business existing. My mother, Elaine, was making her rounds, touching shoulders, accepting compliments on the venue, on the food, on her earrings. It felt normal. Safe, even. Then the section called The Johnson Kids, then and now, appeared on screen. Nicole went first, naturally. Her photos were stunning, a deliberate sequence from pigtails to prom queen to influencer brand partnerships with captions like, "Our visionary," and "Always destined for greatness." The room clapped. Marcus went next. His photos were funny, intentionally funny, the kind of self-aware humor that makes people love you even more. His caption read, "The one who kept us laughing." More applause. Then my photo appeared. That graduation picture. Crooked cap. Oversized gown. Eyes squinting. And underneath, the Johnson family's most reliable punchline. I sat completely still for 3 full seconds while the room laughed around me. I want you to understand something. I wasn't shocked by the cruelty of it. I was shocked by the precision. Nicole knew exactly which photo to choose. She knew exactly what caption would land. She'd rehearsed this. And the way she glanced back at me from the front of the room, that half-second of eye contact, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't accidental. This was a message. Marcus appeared at my elbow almost immediately. Come on, Amara," he said, still grinning. "It's funny. You gotta admit it's a little funny." I didn't answer him. My father stood 20 feet away. He saw my face. I watched him open his mouth, and I watched him close it again. He turned back to his friends. That was the moment I decided to leave. I picked up my clutch from the table, pushed my chair back quietly, and started walking toward the exit. Not storming out. Not crying. Just walking, the kind of walking where you've made a quiet, final decision and your body already knows it before your mind catches up. I was 4 steps from the door. The doors swung open from the outside. 2 hotel staff members I'd never seen before moved quickly to hold them apart, and 3 men in dark suits walked in first, scanning the room the way security people do, calm, methodical, looking for exits and threats simultaneously. Behind them, a man walked in alone. He wasn't loud. He wasn't announcing himself. He was wearing a dark navy suit, no tie, top button open, and he moved through the doorway the way people move when they're completely unbothered by every eye in the room turning toward them. Not arrogant. Just settled. Like the attention didn't register as either flattering or intrusive. He stopped just inside the entrance and spoke to one of the hotel staff, who pointed in the direction of our family. Then he looked up, and his eyes moved across the room, not searching desperately, just scanning quietly. And then he spoke, loud enough to be heard clearly, in a voice that was even and unhurried. "Is Ms. Amara Johnson here?" The ballroom went completely silent. "Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're watching from, city and country. I love seeing where these stories reach. And if you enjoy fast-paced betrayal stories with shocking twists, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next." For a moment, nobody moved. It was the kind of silence that has weight to it, the kind where you can actually hear people recalibrating. Glasses stopped being lifted. Conversations dissolved mid-sentence. The DJ, who had been queuing something up, went still. I stood frozen 4 steps from the exit. I don't know what made me turn around. Maybe it was simple curiosity. Maybe some part of me recognized that whatever was happening behind me was connected to me in a way I didn't yet understand. But I turned. And I saw him properly for the first time. Gabriel Knight was, and I say this without any exaggeration, one of those people who seem to exist in slightly sharper resolution than everyone around them. Not because of how he looked, though he was objectively striking. It was something else. The way he held himself. The way his eyes, when they finally landed on me, didn't perform recognition. They simply arrived, like he'd been looking for something specific and had found it. My father reached him first. Richard Johnson could read a room like a balance sheet, and he'd calculated the value of this visitor within seconds of those doors opening. He crossed the ballroom with his hand extended and his best boardroom smile already deployed. "Gabriel Knight," my father said, as if confirming something to himself. "Richard Johnson. This is quite a surprise. Welcome, welcome. Can we get you a drink?" Gabriel shook his hand briefly, politely. "Thank you, sir. I won't take much of your evening. I'm actually here looking for someone." Nicole materialized from the side of the room the way she always does, appearing exactly where the most important person is standing without it looking like she rushed. "I'm Nicole Johnson," she said, extending her hand with a smile that had been professionally calibrated to be both warm and unforgettable. "You might know my brand, NJ Lifestyle? We just crossed 2 million followers last month." Gabriel looked at her hand, shook it once, and released it. "Congratulations," he said, with the exact same tone someone might use to say noted. Marcus appeared on the other side, tie loosened, clearly deciding this was a networking opportunity he couldn't miss. "Marcus Johnson. Big fan of what you did with the Knight Foundation restructuring last year. Genuinely impressive work." "Thank you," Gabriel said, and then he simply stepped past both of them. He was looking at me. I was still standing near the exit, clutch in my hand, shoes that had been taking me out the door now rooted to the carpet. He crossed the distance between us at the same unhurried pace, and when he stopped, he was close enough that I could see he was exactly as calm as he appeared from across the room. No performance in it. "Miss Johnson," he said. "Amara Johnson?" "Yes," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "My name is Gabriel Knight. I've been trying to reach you for 8 months. He paused, and something moved behind his eyes, not quite frustration, more like the careful restraint of someone who has been patient for a very long time. "I'd like to speak with you privately, if that's all right." The entire room was watching us. I could feel Nicole's attention on my back like a physical thing, that specific kind of focus that isn't curiosity, but calculation. "Of course," I said. We moved toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, near the windows that overlooked the city. One of his security team positioned himself nearby without being obvious about it. Gabriel didn't look around to check. He clearly trusted his people completely. Before he could begin, I noticed Nicole had slipped away from the group near my father. She was moving toward the far side of the room, phone already raised to her ear. She turned slightly away from the crowd. I couldn't hear what she said. I couldn't see who she called. But the expression on her face, the one she wore when she thought nobody was looking, wasn't confusion or curiosity. It was something that looked a great deal like fear. 8 months ago, Gabriel said, someone sent my foundation's compliance team an anonymous tip. He said it simply, the way you state a fact that has taken on enormous weight over time. I kept my face neutral. The tip included documentation, he continued. Financial records. Internal communications. Evidence of systematic fraud inside our charitable disbursement program. 3 senior executives had been redirecting grant funds intended for education nonprofits into shell companies they personally controlled. He paused. Over $11 million. I said nothing. The documentation was extraordinarily thorough, Gabriel said. Whoever compiled it understood exactly how the fraud worked, where the gaps in our audit processes were, and how to present evidence in a way that was immediately actionable for law enforcement. He looked at me directly. It wasn't sent by someone who stumbled onto something by accident. It was sent by someone who understood what they were looking at. People send tips anonymously for a reason, I said carefully. They do, he agreed. And I respected that. We verified the documentation, we brought in external forensic accountants, we cooperated fully with the federal investigation. 3 executives were indicted. The foundation's credibility, which I had spent 6 years building, was protected because someone chose to act. He stopped. But they disappeared before I could thank them. I looked out the window at the city lights. Here's what I had never told anyone, not even my closest friend from work. 8 months ago, I had been consulting on a nonprofit audit, routine work I'd been doing for 3 years. I was good at it. Not glamorously good. Quietly good, in the way that doesn't attract attention, but produces results. During that audit, I'd found something that didn't belong. And then I'd found more. And more. I'd spent 3 weeks compiling the documentation. I'd sent it anonymously. I'd told myself that was the right thing to do and moved on. I had not moved on even slightly, but that's beside the point. After the investigation concluded, Gabriel said, I tried to find the person who sent the tip. We traced it as far as we could. We had a name. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a single folded piece of paper. He opened it and turned it toward me. My full name. My professional email address from 18 months ago, one I didn't use anymore. My former work address. I sent an email to that address within the first 2 weeks, Gabriel said. No response. I sent a formal letter to the work address. No response. Over the following months, I sent 6 more letters to various addresses we identified as potentially connected. I had my assistant make 3 separate attempts to reach out through professional channels. He paused. Nothing. Complete silence. I stared at him. I never received any of those. The words came out before I finished deciding to say them. Gabriel looked at me for a long moment. I know, he said quietly. Which is why I'm here tonight. Something in my stomach turned over slowly. 8 months. He had been trying for 8 months and I had received nothing, not one email, not one letter, not a single message. How did you find me here? I asked. Tonight, specifically? A mutual contact mentioned the Johnson family reunion, Gabriel said. When I cross-referenced the name with our original documentation trail, it matched. He folded the paper carefully and put it away. I want to understand what happened to those letters, Miss Johnson. Because they didn't simply get lost. He let that land. They didn't simply get lost. I thought about Nicole's face when Gabriel walked in. The way the color had shifted slightly under her foundation. The way she disappeared to make that phone call. I thought about all the times over the past 8 months I'd wondered why a door had stayed closed, why an opportunity had evaporated, why a contact had gone suddenly cold. And for the first time, a thought I had never allowed myself to think fully began assembling itself in the back of my mind piece by piece, like a picture coming slowly into focus. Gabriel opened his briefcase on the windowsill. He did it without ceremony, without drama, the way someone does a thing they've been waiting to do for a very long time and have finally, simply, arrived at the moment. Inside the briefcase were envelopes. Not a few envelopes. There were 11 of them arranged neatly in a row. Each one had my name on the front in crisp professional type. Some had formal letterheads. Some had return addresses from the Knight Foundation's legal department. One had a red urgent stamp in the corner that had clearly been applied and then carefully smoothed over, as if someone had tried to make it less visible. Every single envelope had been opened. Not torn open carelessly. Opened cleanly, the kind of opening that happens with a letter opener or something similarly precise, along the top seam, in a way that could, if you weren't paying close attention, look like the factory seal had simply given way. and then resealed. Thin strips of clear tape, carefully applied. You'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. I only noticed because Gabriel tilted one envelope slightly under the light from the windows, and the tape caught the reflection differently than the paper around it. Every letter was intercepted, he said. Opened. Resealed. And either destroyed or redirected. He looked at me steadily. These are the copies I retained. Everything I sent, I kept a duplicate of. I picked up one of the envelopes slowly. The tape was smooth under my fingertips, but unmistakable once I knew what I was feeling for. Who had access to your mail? He asked. This is my parents' address, I said. I've been living here for the past year while I rebuilt my consulting practice after. I stopped. After my biggest client had abruptly terminated our contract for reasons they'd never explained to me. After a professional setback. Who lives in the house? My parents. And Nicole. I set the envelope down carefully. Nicole has her own floor of the house. She's been there for about 2 years, since she moved back to expand her brand locally. Gabriel was quiet for a moment. The music from the party was still playing somewhere on the other side of the ballroom, something light and celebratory that felt almost surreal given what was happening in this corner near the windows. A few family members had drifted closer, trying to look casual about the fact that they were definitely eavesdropping. My Uncle Gerald had positioned himself near a floral arrangement approximately 8 feet away and was performing an extraordinary level of interest in a white orchid. I heard footsteps behind me. My father had finally come over. His boardroom calm was still in place, but there were small cracks in it, a tightness around his jaw, a deliberate steadiness in how he held his glass. Can I ask what this is regarding? Richard said, looking between Gabriel and me. Richard. My mother appeared at his side. Elaine Johnson, composed as ever in her deep burgundy dress, but her eyes moved to the envelopes on the windowsill and stayed there for just a fraction too long. These are letters I sent to your daughter, Gabriel said, turning them so both my parents could see clearly. Over the past 8 months. She never received them. He paused. They were intercepted inside this family's home. My father's expression didn't change on the surface. But I knew his face the way you only know the face of someone who has disappointed you quietly, repeatedly, across many years, and I watched something move behind his eyes. Not surprise. Something more complicated. Something that looked like the moment a person realizes they have been avoiding a truth that has now arrived in the room and will not be leaving. My mother's hand tightened on her glass. Where is Nicole? I asked. Everyone looked around. Nicole had not come back from that phone call. If you were Amara right now, would you confront Nicole immediately or stay quiet until you had proof? Tell me in the comments, because what happened next changed everything. She came back 9 minutes later. I know it was 9 minutes because I had been watching the clock on the wall above the bar without quite realizing I was doing it, the way you monitor time when some part of your nervous system knows that something is about to change. Nicole walked back into the ballroom the way she always walked into rooms, composed, deliberate, radiating the specific energy of someone who has already decided how they want to be perceived before they cross the threshold. She was good at it. She had been good at it her entire life. But she hadn't expected Gabriel's briefcase to be open on the windowsill. She hadn't expected the envelopes. She stopped about 15 feet away. Her eyes moved across the scene with the speed of someone calculating Gabriel, the briefcase, the envelopes, my face, my parents' faces, and the calculation was visible this time. She couldn't hide it fast enough. Nicole, Gabriel said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Please come here. It was the kind of request that is also a statement of fact. She came. Standing in that small circle near the windows, with the city spread out behind us and the party still murmuring somewhere to our left, Nicole looked at the envelopes and then looked at me. And for one unguarded second, just one, her expression was naked. Not guilty exactly. Something colder. The expression of someone who has made a series of careful decisions over a long period of time and is now watching those decisions materialize into consequences. Then the mask came back up. I have no idea what any of this is, she said. Gabriel reached into the briefcase again. He produced a single sheet, a printed document, dense with text and what appeared to be a chain of addresses and timestamps. Our tech team traced the digital route of several emails I sent to your sister's old professional address, he said. The emails were read. Not bounced, not lost in a spam filter, read on a device connected to this family's home network. Then deleted from the incoming server before they could sync to any of her devices. There's more, Gabriel said quietly. He produced another page. 18 months ago, a consulting contract your sister held with Hartley nonprofit group was terminated. Hartley cited, and I'm reading directly, a credibility concern raised by an anonymous internal source. We spoke with Hartley's compliance director last week. The anonymous concern was submitted via email from a private account. He set the page down. Our team traced that account's registration through 3 layers of privacy forwarding. He paused. It originated from a device registered in this house. The ballroom felt very far away. I heard my mother make a small, involuntary sound. Here's the thing about betrayal, the real kind, the kind that has been running quietly underneath the surface of your life for years. It doesn't feel the way you expect it to. It doesn't arrive like a punch. It arrives like the moment your eyes finally adjust in a dark room and you realize the shapes you've been half seeing for years are exactly what you feared they were. I had known, on some level, that things had been harder than they should have been. Contracts that disappeared. Relationships that went cold. Doors that I had been certain were opening that suddenly, inexplicably, weren't. I had told myself I was being paranoid. I was not being paranoid. Nicole, my father said. His voice was flat. Not angry flat, which in Richard Johnson was much worse. But Gabriel wasn't finished. Your sister's anonymous tip to our foundation exposed 3 executives for fraud, he said, looking at Nicole directly. 2 of those executives sat on the advisory board of Prestige Partner Collective, a network of brand collaborators and media buyers that your company, NJ Lifestyle, relies on for approximately 40% of your sponsored content revenue. He paused. If those executives had been publicly connected to you through a relationship with a woman who exposed them, someone they worked alongside, someone they knew, the investigation would have expanded. It would have included every professional connection they had. It would have included you. The silence was absolute. Nicole said nothing. You didn't intercept those letters because you were jealous, I said. The words came out quiet, almost calm, because I wasn't performing anything. I was simply arriving, finally, at something true. You intercepted them because you needed me to stay invisible. For the first time in my memory, Nicole had no answer. The mask didn't drop dramatically. It didn't shatter. It simply became insufficient, too thin for the weight of what was standing in front of her, and what I saw underneath it wasn't the villain I might have written in my worst moments. It was something sadder and more recognizable. A person who had made one self-serving decision, and then made another to protect the first, and another to protect that one, until the accumulated weight of all those decisions had become an architecture she was living inside, and had been for years. When did it start? I asked. She didn't answer that, either. My father set his glass down on the nearest table. It made a soft sound on the linen, and somehow that small, precise sound was the thing that broke the stillness. People began looking toward us. Not fully, not yet, but the peripheral awareness in the room was shifting. People could feel it the way you feel a change in pressure before weather arrives. Richard Johnson turned to look at me, and his face was doing something I had very rarely seen it do. It was honest. I knew something was wrong, he said. Over the last couple of years, there were things that didn't add up. He stopped. I told myself I was reading too much into it. Richard, my mother began. No, Elaine. He said it gently but fully, the way you close a door quietly but completely. He looked back at me. You called me 4 months ago and told me a client had dropped you without explanation. You were confused. You couldn't understand it. He paused. I called Nicole that same evening. She told me you'd probably mishandled the relationship. That you tended to overextend yourself and disappoint clients. He swallowed. I believed her. I didn't call you back to ask more questions. I held his gaze. This was the part that cuts differently than anger. This was the part that had always cut differently, not the act of cruelty, because Nicole's cruelty, I could identify and set down. It was this. My father, standing 8 inches taller than me, successful and capable and fully equipped to ask one follow-up question, choosing not to. When did believing the worst about me become easier than asking me the truth? I said. The words came out of me the way things come out when they've been stored at a precise temperature for years, not bitter, not hot. Just exactly what they were. My father looked like I had pressed gently on a bruise he hadn't admitted existed. I don't have a good answer for that, he said. I know, I said. My mother was crying, quietly, the way composed women cry when they've decided crying is necessary, but volume is not. She pressed a tissue to the corner of her eye, and then seemed to realize the tissue was one of the cocktail napkins from the bar, and she looked at it with brief, bewildered displeasure. I told myself Nicole just understood this family better, Elaine said. Her voice was careful. She always seemed to know what everyone needed. She managed things. I let her manage things. She stopped. I didn't ask what she was managing. Marcus had come close enough to hear most of the last 10 minutes. He was standing slightly apart from everyone, not performing his usual energy, not working toward a joke. Just standing, with his hands in his pockets and an expression I had never seen on his face before. I made fun of you tonight, he said. I looked at him. The slideshow. He exhaled. I laughed. I kept laughing even when he stopped. I do it because Nicole makes it easy to do it. She sets it up and I play along, and I've always told myself it's just how we are. Just family ribbing. He shook his head slowly. But you never ribbed back. I never noticed that you never ribbed back. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was just saying it out loud to me in front of people. Sometimes that matters, even when it's not enough. I noticed, I said simply. Gabriel had stepped back slightly during this, not out of disinterest, but with the deliberate tact of someone who understands that some conversations need to unfold without an audience, even an ally. He was standing a few feet away, his briefcase closed, watching the room with a stillness that wasn't detachment. It was patience. I had never experienced patience as a form of care before. I need to tell you something. It was my mother's voice, and it had changed in the last 2 minutes in a way I couldn't quite name. The composure was still there, but it had shifted from controlled to effortful, which is a different thing entirely. She looked at Gabriel. Then she looked at me. Some of those letters didn't go to the main address, she said. 2 of them came directly to my attention. Nicole asked me, she said you'd been going through something difficult and that receiving formal correspondence from companies connected to the situation you'd helped expose might be distressing for you. She said she wanted to protect you from being overwhelmed. She paused. She asked me to hold them. She said she'd speak to you about them when the time was right. The room was very quiet. And you gave them to her? I asked. I kept them for a week, Elaine said. Then Nicole said she'd spoken to you and you weren't ready. And then somehow another month passed and she stopped. I gave them to her, yes. I don't have a good reason. She made it sound like the right thing. She made it sound like love. Gabriel opened his briefcase again. He laid the envelopes out on the table that was closest, a round table near the windows that still had 2 champagne glasses on it from earlier in the evening, and arranged them in a row. 11 envelopes. Dates typed in the upper corners, spanning from month 2 to month 7. He laid a 12th envelope separately. This one was never sent, he said. I wrote it about a month ago. I wasn't sure I'd find you. He looked at me. I brought it anyway. One by one, at no one's prompting, the people in that small circle began to really look at the envelopes. My father picked one up and examined the tape along the seam. Marcus picked up another and held it toward the light from the window, then set it down carefully, like he was handling something that deserved gentleness now. Nicole had not moved or spoken in several minutes. I looked at her. There's a particular kind of courage in the people who decide, in their worst moment, to say something true. And there's a particular kind of heartbreak in watching someone choose, instead, to go silent. Not from shock. Not from grief. From the deep-rooted habit of a person who has managed narratives for so long that honesty no longer feels like a genuine option. Nicole, my father said. I need you to tell me what you did. She looked at the envelopes. Then she looked at me. And what I saw in her face, underneath everything, was exhaustion. The bone-deep exhaustion of someone who has been running a very complex story for a very long time and has just, finally, arrived at the place where the running stops. I didn't want to lose what I'd built, she said. Her voice was low, almost steady. I know that's not an explanation. It's not even a reason. But it's the truth. She looked at the envelopes. I told myself it wouldn't matter. I told myself you'd find your own way. I told myself, she stopped. I told myself a lot of things. The party had effectively stopped. Not dramatically, nobody had made an announcement. But the music had been quietly turned down at some point, and the family members who had been circling had drifted close enough that the circle itself had expanded. Aunts, uncles, cousins. The people I had grown up with who had laughed at that slideshow an hour ago. All of them looking at a table covered in 11 opened envelopes. One lie, I kept thinking. One lie had not been enough. So she'd made another to cover it, and another after that, until the whole architecture of it was so layered, so embedded in the daily functioning of our family, that my mother hadn't even known she was participating. That was the most devastating part. Not Nicole's calculation. The way ordinary love had been quietly borrowed and redirected until it became something none of us had chosen. Gabriel asked to speak with me privately. Not dramatically. Not at the center of the room with everyone watching. He simply, quietly, asked, and we stepped outside the ballroom into the corridor, where the air was cooler and the carpet was thicker and the sounds of everything that had just happened were muffled to a murmur behind the closed doors. He didn't open with anything formal. Are you all right? He asked. I thought about the question seriously. I'm somewhere between all right and not yet, I said. He nodded like that was a completely reasonable and understood answer. That's honest. We stood in the corridor for a moment. A hotel staff member walked past with a trolley and gave us a polite, professionally unsurprised nod. The expression of someone who works in luxury hotels and has learned that unusual things happen in the vicinity of important people, and the correct response is to simply keep moving. I want to say something, Gabriel said, and I want to be clear that it has nothing to do with the foundation or the investigation or anything that happened in that room. I turned to look at him. When our team was tracking down who sent that tip, he said, we interviewed a lot of people. Coworkers. Former clients. Professional contacts. We were trying to build a picture of who this person was, and everyone we spoke to described the same woman. He paused. They talked about someone who was quietly precise. Who did her work without needing it recognized. Who cared about doing the right thing in situations where doing the right thing came at a cost. He looked at me. Everyone we talked to respected her deeply. Past tense, I noted. The corner of his mouth moved. Present tense. They just didn't all say it to her face. I looked down at the carpet. I spent 8 months trying to find you, he said. And I told myself it was because you deserve to be thanked. Because what you did saved something I'd spent years building. Because it was the right thing. He stopped. And all of that is true. He paused again. But it's not the whole truth. I looked up. Gabriel Knight was, in that moment, not the billionaire businessman who had walked into a ballroom and rearranged the entire architecture of my evening. He was something simpler and more recognizable. He was a person standing in a hotel corridor at 9:40 at night, choosing to be honest about something that made him slightly less certain. Every description I heard of you, he said, I found myself wanting to meet you more. Not for the foundation. For the completely personal and not particularly professional reason that the woman everyone described sounded like someone I had been hoping to meet for a very long time. He reached into his jacket pocket, and I felt my heart do something sudden and disorganized, and produced a small envelope. The 12th letter. The one I didn't send, he said. He held it out. I took it. Inside, on a single sheet of paper in handwriting that was spare and deliberate, was a letter unlike the 11 before it. The others, I would later read, were formal and professional expressions of gratitude, invitations to discuss the foundation, offers to ensure I received proper recognition for what I'd done. Appropriate. Correct. Everything a letter from a businessman to a whistleblower should be. This letter was different. It was 4 paragraphs. It said, in plain language, that he had been looking for me because he felt he owed me something, and then that he had kept looking because he had begun to understand that wasn't the only reason. It said that he didn't know if this would be strange or unwelcome, but that he had decided honesty was the better failure mode. It said that he hoped, when he found me, there would be a chance to know each other properly. And then, at the bottom, in handwriting slightly more deliberate than the rest, like he'd written it last and paused before adding it. I'd like to ask you to dinner. If you say no, I completely understand, and none of what I've said before changes. But I'd rather ask and be wrong than not ask and always wonder. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and held it in my hands for a moment. This isn't how I expected tonight to go, I said. No, Gabriel agreed. I'd imagine not. I came tonight to see my family, I said. I almost didn't come. I almost left before dinner. I know, he said quietly. You were 4 steps from the door. I looked at him. I was watching for you from the moment I arrived, he said simply. Here is the thing about standing in a hotel corridor at 9:40 at night, holding a letter from someone who spent 8 months looking for you while your family was across the hall reckoning with the weight of years of quiet harm. The thing they don't put in movies is that it doesn't feel triumphant. It doesn't feel like a scene. It feels like a very deep breath. It feels like something you didn't know you'd been waiting to exhale. Yes, I said. Gabriel looked at me. To dinner, I said. Yes. He smiled. Not the performative smile of someone who has won something. The quiet, private smile of someone who has been patient and careful and has arrived somewhere they genuinely wanted to be. We went back inside together. The family was still there, some having quiet, difficult conversations in corners, some sitting in stunned stillness, some, like my Uncle Gerald, still apparently finding the orchid arrangement remarkable. My father was sitting at one of the round tables with his elbows on his knees and his hands folded, which was the posture he adopted when he was thinking about something seriously and not yet ready to speak. Marcus was standing near the bar drinking water, which was, for Marcus, practically a statement of spiritual reckoning. Nicole was sitting alone at the far end of the ballroom, near the entrance. I looked at her for a long moment. She looked back. This is the part people always get wrong about the end of a story like this. They expect the confrontation, the speech, the definitive final word that closes everything cleanly and leaves nobody in any doubt about who is right and who is wrong. They want the gavel. I didn't have one. What I had was this: a table covered in opened envelopes, a family that had spent the last hour seeing itself clearly for the first time in years, a father who had finally asked a real question instead of a comfortable one, a mother who had admitted she'd confused management for love, a brother who had said something true without knowing if it would be accepted, and a sister, sitting alone, who had spent years building a story about me, about herself, about what we owed each other, and who was now living in the wreckage of it. That's not nothing. That's not nothing at all. I didn't cross the room to her. I didn't have to. There would be time, if she chose it, for the longer, harder conversation. The kind that doesn't happen in a hotel ballroom in one evening. The kind that takes months and honesty and a willingness to stop protecting yourself from what you've done. That was her work, not mine. I couldn't do it for her. What I could do, what I did, quietly, at the table where my father was sitting, was pull out a chair and sit beside him. He looked up. I'm not ready to be done with this family, I said. But things need to change. He nodded. I know, he said. My mother came over and she sat down, and we didn't say anything for a while. Just sat. The 3 of us at a round table in a hotel ballroom in the middle of a family reunion that had become something entirely different from what anyone had planned, and somehow, in that specific way that only real things are, something more honest. Gabriel sat 2 tables over, giving us space with such natural grace that it barely registered, talking quietly with one of his team. The music was still playing somewhere. I don't know how to give you a bow on the end of a story like this, because real endings don't come with bows. They come with beginnings, new ones, uncomfortable ones, the kind that require maintenance. What I can tell you is this. Gabriel and I did have dinner. And then another dinner. And then several more, and then a great many other things, over the months that followed. My family did the hard work. Some of it, anyway, the parts they were willing to do. My father became, gradually, a man who asked questions instead of avoiding them. My mother learned, slowly, to distinguish between managing peace and actually creating it. Marcus, in the particular way of people who have always used humor as armor, began occasionally setting the armor down. Nicole and I exist in a space right now that doesn't have a simple name. It isn't reconciliation and it isn't estrangement. It's something in between, a cautious, still renegotiating thing that is perhaps the most honest thing we've had between us in years. And the 12th letter? I kept it. It's in the top drawer of my desk, underneath the first professional commendation I ever received back when I was 24 and newly starting out, and believed, in the uncomplicated way of young people, that doing good work quietly was enough. I still believe that. I just understand now that sometimes, quietly, someone is also looking for you. And sometimes, if you don't walk out 4 steps before the door, they find you. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Before you go, tell me in the comments, do you think Amara made the right decision by giving her family another chance, or would you have walked away for good? I read as many of your comments as I can. And if you're new here, subscribe. There's another unforgettable story waiting for you.